Welcome to Techstination. Joining us is Kristin Kolodge, Executive Director of Driver Interaction and Human Machine Interface Research at J.D. Power. Thanks for joining us, Kristin.
Thanks for having me on, Fred. I appreciate it.
Very interesting job title. Give us a little more background about what you do there.
So I get the fun of being able to research and understand how it is that consumers want to interface and really interact with their cars. So this comes from, looking at your infotainment screen, looking at the different technology on your vehicles and what makes sense and what is intuitive to you, and then translating that back to the industry so that they can deliver.
And you've been taking a look at some of the newer technology on the horizon. Autonomous technology, and that means self-driving vehicles and electric vehicles as well. Tell us what you've been researching here and what you found.
Yeah, so we wanted to know, what do consumers think about these new mobility options that the automotive industry is working so diligently on and have been for the last couple of years, but it's really been a strategic focus for these companies. So we wanted to make sure that we have a pulse on what do consumers think about self-driving vehicles and what do consumers think about battery electric vehicles as they're being developed now, and their interest and willingness to purchase, and what their, what advantages and disadvantages are on the consumer's mind, so that we can, again, translate that back to the industry. But we also did an interesting twist on our research this year, and we asked similar types of questions to industry experts. And so these industry experts came from a multitude of different facets, whether they be an automotive manufacturer, a supplier, different other sectors that are really deeply ingrained in this development of both of these mobility options, because we wanted to see if the pulse of where the industry thinks the consumer readiness is, if that is in match, or if there are elements that are not in alignment, so that we can highlight how to bring those two closer together.
What have you found in terms of consumer sentiment when it comes to autonomous technology, self-driving vehicles, which are different actually than driverless vehicles, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, right now the consumer sentiment regarding self-driving vehicles, it is what we would call in the low category. Consumer confidence, there's still a high degree of skepticism. There still is a large portion of the population that they don't see any advantages to self-driving vehicles, so they're not sure really why we're having this conversation. So there's an uphill battle at this point in time. But one of the interesting elements that comes out of the research is we asked the consumers to tell us about their level of knowledge with self-driving vehicles. And the majority at this point admit to either having no knowledge at all about self-driving vehicles, or only just a very little bit about it. So we see that there is, the more knowledgeable someone is about self-driving vehicles, then their thoughts and perceptions about the advantages and what self-driving vehicles can bring, that conversation changes. So at this point in time, we still have the majority of the United States population that just is uninformed at this point in time, and as a result, they're highly skeptical.
But the results are different when you speak to some of the experts in the industry.
And when we talk to the experts in the industry, they recognize that this level of consumer trust is their top challenge at this point in time, that they really have to address, and build this consumer trust with self-driving vehicles. They know that's their top challenge. So they are definitely, they see that as an issue. I don't think we need to convince them of that point.
Right. And to your point, according to the results here, the majority, really 2/3 of the people that responded said they had little or no knowledge about self-driving vehicles. And, of course, there's skepticism.
Exactly. But when we look at the level of people, as that knowledge base increases, then we see them much more interested, and the level of alignment where they see that self-driving vehicles could improve traffic safety, that those are matching more of what the industry's purpose for developing these vehicles are. So I think that, this addressing this element of, what can we do to really inform the consumer population more will certainly help build trust, increase the interest potentially in these self-driving vehicles as a potential solution going forward.
When it comes to how the technology might be used, uh, what are some of the areas where there is some interest?
So we looked at multiple different methods for self-driving vehicles. So whether it be a personal vehicle that someone owns that has a self-driving capability, whether they're using a robo-taxi, so maybe a self-driving Uber or a Lyft vehicle, looking at self-driving public transit, and we also looked at goods being delivered by a self-driving car. And actually the transportation mode out of those options that was most agreeable with consumers was having their goods delivered by a self-driving vehicle. That was the one that excited them the most, that they were the most comfortable with. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, they were least comfortable with riding in a self-driving vehicle. So we were really seeing that level of distinction of, okay, you can deliver something to me, but at this point, I'm less comfortable being put myself into that vehicle.
And some of the worries that people have to do with risks of vehicles being hacked or just tech failures. I guess people are accustomed to their phones and computers crashing, and so they don't want to trust it in a vehicle.
Exactly. Right now, we see nearly 3/4 are worried about those technology failures and errors. And just like you said, next on the list is people are worried about their vehicle being hacked, and even worried about what happens if my self-driving vehicle gets into a crash? How is the legal responsibility and liability really covered in that instance? But going back to the technology failures and errors, lots of parallels in terms of consumer experience with other technology in our life, and recognizing that it's not error-free. And so they're drawing a parallel analogy to say, what makes me think that my vehicle won't be error-free? So it certainly is an appropriate worry. We do know that the manufacturers are taking different strategies to build in system redundancy, et cetera, to alleviate such failures or errors having catastrophic results. But that type of information, again, comes back to that level of consumer knowledge base. It hasn't necessarily translated down to the consumer base at this point in time, that is what is being developed into the vehicles.
You also took a look at the sentiments about electric vehicles. What did you find?
We did. So we were focused primarily on battery electric vehicles. So we were really taking it to that end of the spectrum. And a similar story. At this point in time, we see the majority of people have had no personal experience in a battery electric vehicle. So that was really 68% of the people have had no experience, riding or being a passenger, nor ever owning a battery electric vehicle. So similar situation where just the majority are inexperienced. And so when we're talking about some of these thoughts about battery electric vehicles, they don't have necessarily that base of experience to go on. But even as such, the sentiment regarding battery electric vehicles at this point in time, it's really in a take it or leave it type of territory. Consumers are very cognizant of the benefits that battery electric vehicles can bring to the environment, but when asked if they would purchase one in the future that transition into, me, myself, I would purchase a battery electric vehicle, that proportion is significantly lower. So I think we haven't necessarily convinced them of why that would be the right purchase consideration for them.
And the biggest concerns are range anxiety, maybe, and the length of time it takes to charge your vehicle?
It is, and at this point in time, I mean, that's been a consistent worry that we've seen through previous research, so it still is the worry at this point in time. Not to sound like a broken record, but I do believe that once we get people with more experience with these vehicles and really understanding how it works on a daily basis, some of those fears will change. We saw that for the percentage of, it was 4% of our population had owned a battery electric vehicle previously. And so when we asked those consumers, what they would want for range and charging time, we saw different answers from those that had experience versus those that did not. More of that population that had owned a battery electric vehicle, they weren't as heavily populated on feeling like they needed to have 500 miles or more of driving range with their vehicle. They were much more centered around a 300-mile type of range for their needs. So you could see that level of just experience coming through, creating a bit more of a realistic level of what my charging needs would be.
Interesting. On both of these fronts, I guess Tesla owners might have different opinions than the public at large.
Certainly Tesla owners, right, have been a unique psychographic in and of themselves, certainly. But yes, we would anticipate, each of the different brands and, that experience of the owner is going to really set up some distinct wants and needs.
And I suppose it will be interesting as well to watch how sentiments may change over the coming months and years.
Exactly, and that was really the purpose of our study, Fred, was to create this pulse metric on a quarterly basis. We know that technology is moving so fast that we want to be able to see how the consumer sentiment is changing over time. So looking at that every quarter, and then again looking at the industry point of view as well, to be able to see how things are changing and hopefully how that consumer sentiment regarding the desire and interest in both of these mobility options improves over time, so that when they do become available to the mass market, that those consumers are really ready and excited for that option.
Once again, this is a new survey on mobility confidence from J.D. Power. Kristin Kolodge, thank you for taking the time with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Now this. Innovation. Hi, I'm Fred Fishkin, and I've been covering consumer technology for a long time, and it takes a lot to impress me. That's why I'm excited to tell you about the latest way to enjoy cooking in the great outdoors from my friend Patrick Sherwin and his great team at GoSun Stove. What if you could harness the sun to cook your meals anywhere you go, day or night? The GoSun Fusion arrives this summer using the company's tried and true reflectors and a solar vacuum tube to get you cooking without the mess of charcoal, heavy propane tanks, or smoke. And with an optional solar panel and battery storage, and the ability to plug in at home or on the road, you really can use the GoSun Fusion to cook anytime and anywhere. Want to learn more? Head to gosun.co and use the code TEXTINATION to save 10%. That's gosun.co.